Well, hi, everybody. I'm Don Stewart, and welcome to another edition of Breaking News. Today is Monday, the second day of September, 2024. And as always, we have the latest headlines that are important to know with respect to what the Bible has to say the world will be like at the time of the end of this present age before the return of Christ. And that's what we do here every day, twice a day, give you the headlines, but only the headlines that fit with what the scripture has to say about what our world is expected to be. And it's exactly what our world is. It is amazing. Also, too, starting tomorrow, we're going to be doing a new feature here on our website on Educating Our World, the website on our YouTube page, and on our app, EOW with Don Stewart. For the next 65 days, we will have a feature called Timeless Truths from the Bible. And each day will feature one of the books I've written, one of the 65 books. It's on our website, Educating Our World. And we'll just take a few minutes. We'll explain what's in the book, kind of some of the highlights, and also list some timeless truths that are there in the book. And the idea is for you to understand why we do this, what we do, and hopefully to study some of these subjects because they're very important for Christians to know. Because educating our world is simply that. We're educating our world with biblical Christianity. It's not just with the latest events, but with across the board what God has taught on so many subjects. Plus, too, we're going to add soon, and we're working on this right now, a feature also for those of you that may want to learn Hebrew or Greek. We're working it now. I'm working with my daughters who are language experts, who are specialists, and we're going to figure out a way to do this and save you some money. And rather than having to spend thousands of bucks taking a course, we will put something together, and hopefully many of you will take advantage of. Now, of course, it's not for everybody. And as we're going to say, when you do something like this, the romance goes off after about a half hour of studying the biblical language. It's a lot of work because it's grammar, but believe me, it is worth it in the end. All right, so let's get to the headlines. First of all, autopsy reveals autopsy reveals the timing of the tragic end to the six hostages. This is a really sad story we'll have to begin with, but it's just come out over the wire and it's given more details. The U.S. now is going to offer, here we go, the final hostage deal framework. Here we go again. Critical days ahead, officials say. The strike, which is now going on in Israel, the one-day strike won't bring the hostages back, but it is going to harm Israel, and that's what it's doing right now. And the IDF should be discussing a response to the execution of six hostages. But the sad thing is there's really no good answer for what they should do. So these are the headlines that are in the news today. We're going to look at them and see how they fit with what the scripture has to say the world will be like. All right. Headline number one, autopsy finds six hostages were shot multiple times at close range in the last 48 to 72 hours. This is such a heartbreaking story. The findings indicate that the captives were murdered. They were executed by Hamas guards as the IDF troops closed in on the Rafah tunnel complex in which they were being held. The IDF chief had visited the site now where the bodies were found. And the latest information is the hostages, the bodies were recovered. And meaning between Thursday and Friday morning is when they were murdered, according to the health ministry, when they were found again on Saturday. The ministry added that an examination carried out by Abu Kabir Forensic Institute found that all six hostages were shot at multiple times from close range, indicating they were executed. Yes, they were shot in the head, execution style. The IDF said the Hamas terrorists murdered them relatively shortly before the troops located their bodies on Saturday afternoon in a tunnel in Rafah. Again, a tragic, tragic story, and this is one where it's still resonating with the citizens of Israel and literally around the world. Heartbreaking, innocent hostages that are, bound, tied. They've been neglected. They were starved. Their bodies showed signs of, being, mistreated. And then to top it all off, after almost 11 months in captivity, they're brutally executed by these murdering terrorists. So this is the latest with that. All right, headline number two. Along this line, the U.S. to offer a final hostage deal framework. Critical days are ahead, the officials say. Biden is set to offer a take it or leave it deal to both sides in a final push to secure a hostage deal, the report says. American officials tell the families of hostages with U.S. citizenship that the ball is in Hamas's court. American officials say that the U.S. is discussing a final framework for a hostage deal and a ceasefire in Gaza with Egypt and Qatar. An official told the Washington Post on Sunday that U.S. President Joe Biden's administration considers this a take it or leave it deal as part of Biden's efforts to expedite negotiations following the death of six hostages whose bodies were located, recovered, and returned to Israel from the Gaza Strip on Saturday. According to senior Biden administration officials, the Americans plan to present the framework to Israel and Hamas in the coming weeks. If both sides don't accept it, this could lead to the end of the U.S.-led negotiations for a deal. He said that the U.S., along with other mediators, Egypt and Qatar, began working on the proposal even before the hostages' bodies were discovered. Other officials said it was still unclear how the deaths of the six might affect the chances of reaching a deal in the coming weeks. You can't keep negotiating this. This process has to be called at some point, a senior official said. Does it, the hostages' murder, derail the deal? No, if anything, it should add additional urgency to the closing phase, which we're already in. So the White House announced yesterday, well, actually today, Monday, that Biden and U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris and it was the Vice President Harris and the Democratic presidential candidate, along with Biden, will meet with the negotiating team in the White House Situation Room to discuss efforts to promote an agreement that guarantees the release of remaining hostages. Meanwhile, the families of the hostages with U.S. citizenship were invited to an online meeting with White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan and Biden's Middle East envoy Brett McGurk. And again, they were told the days are critical now for the release of the hostages, including 7 Americans still held by Hamas. And we hope the pressure on the parties, including Hamas, Qatar, Egypt, and Israel, will finally yield the desired outcome. That's the story. Now, let's face it. There's no motivation whatsoever for Hamas to agree to a ceasefire, not when you have scores of Israelis shutting down the country because of the death of certain hostages today, not when you got Israelis fighting among themselves. And so there's no way on earth they're going to agree to that. What they will do is make the demands again. Well, we'll leave as long we'll release the hostages and we'll have a ceasefire. We'll release them slow in drips and drabs. But Israel has to get out of Gaza first. Israel has to remove themselves from the Philadelphia corridor, the buffer between Egypt and Israel there in Gaza, and making all these other demands. And you'll have to release X number of murderers that are in the Palestinian murderers in Israeli prisons, so they can come out and do it again, which has happened in the past. And so there's really no hope for this, none whatsoever. And why they're doing this is beyond me, but I guess it's good political theater, but it's really nothing that's going to come of it. And it's amazing how Biden was shocked and others were shocked that Hamas would kill hostages, would murder them. I don't know what they're so shocked about. Remember what happened on October 7th. At least 1,200 people were murdered by these terrorists, men, women, and children tortured, taken captive. And so this is who they are. They haven't changed their personality, haven't changed their motivation. They're still an evil group of people. And their goal is to destroy Israel. Their charter calls for the destruction of Israel. So they're not going to make any agreement. But anyway, we still have to play this game. So we bring you the stories, and we will continue to, but we'll just see what happens from here. Now, a third headline is very well spoken. A strike won't bring the hostages back, but it will harm Israel. And this is exactly what we said. And it's interesting. There's a very long story. We will hit some of the highlights of this about what's going on right now, because the country's basically shut down to probably 6 p.m. tonight. In schools, businesses, the airports closed, et cetera, et cetera. No matter what Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar does, every monstrous and humane act, Israel's public demands that he be given more incentives harden his position. It's exactly right. It seems that Sinwar could not have dreamed of such success. The execution of hostages with shots to their head leads to the paralyzed Israeli economy and public anger towards the government, while he emerges unscathed. No matter what he does, every monstrous and inhumane act, the Israeli public demands that he be given more incentives to harden his positions. Since January, he has systematically undermined every opportunity for a deal, the full details of which have never been disclosed to the public, which seems so eager to surrender to him. In the depths of the earth, in the terror tunnels where he holds our sons and daughters, Sinwar knows that they are his lottery ticket, and he will not relinquish them. Once again, he divides Israeli society and manages to fragment it through futile negotiations over a small portion of the hostages that he might ostensibly release. Does he now have the reason, after watching the news broadcasts and the statements from opposition politicians and Histadrut leader Aaron Ben David, to change his approach? Is this what will crack his cruel heart and prompt him to fold and return the hostages? Anyone who believes this is so naive. His hatred for Netanyahu and the government blinds him to any possibility of reconsideration, and this is deeply saddening. And the article goes on to say it's astonishing that neither Nasrallah nor even Sinwar had managed to disrupt Ben Gurion Airport for more than a few hours. Even in the 3-hour war last week, they failed to achieve what Arnon Bar David and a Histadrut provided them, this is the labor union, in exchange for a few more bullets in the heads of our hostages. The righteous and just anger of all of us is not to be directed it's not being directed by the hostages and menacing families formed towards Sinwar, nor is there a demand for the government to exact a price from them and the terrorists in prison in Israel. There isn't even a call to stop the reckless aid in food, fuel, and equipment to Gaza, where our sons and daughters are held. Criticism of the government is legitimate. The anger and frustration over the loss of strategy and direction are palpable. For nearly a year, we've faced leadership headed by Gallant and Netanyahu who have been unable to clearly outline the war's objectives beyond outdated statements that have lost their value months ago. The two leaders are mired in indecision, unable to make bold decisions or face the public with courage and honesty to present the various costs and clarify Hamas's demands and their implications. What practical, tactical, and strategic proposals do they intend to bring? In the absence of such proposals and in the face of this vast vacuum, frustration and distrust breed among political figures like Bar David and his allies. Again, he's the head of the labor union, who exploit the opportunity for political battles at the expense of the hostages. Even if their concern for the hostages is genuine, their actions are destructive and dangerous to the hostages' lives in Israeli society. All right, but the hostages should not be used as a tool for this, and certainly pressuring the government to capitulate to any deal at any cost, just for some of them, will not bring the hostages back alive. Very well said, and something we've been reiterating. And yet today, Israel is, flummoxed. They've got, roads that are being blocked, schools not meeting today, work is shut down, the airport's not working. Everything's, they've just shut down the country protesting the fact that there's no deal. Well, Israel has made offers. They've made very generous offers, more generous than they should. And Hamas is the one that's not budging. And so, again, you're talking to the wrong people here. But this is the frustration we see. And again, it's led by a lot of leftists and anti-Netanyahu and actually anti-Israeli, those that hate the government and hate what's going on there. So it's terrible, but this is what we see. Now, the last headline is another opinion piece that is really well stated, but it shows the problem that we got here. Headline 4, the IDF should be discussing response to the execution of 6 hostages. Well, yes, they should. Following recovery of the bodies of recently murdered hostages, public discourse centers on grief, if they could have been rescued while still alive, and how to prevent future tragedies. Yet discussions of the IDF's response to such heinous crimes remain surprisingly non-existent. In other words, they're not even talking about it. In the aftermath of recovering the bodies of 6 murdered hostages, public discourse naturally gravitates towards grief. The troubling question is whether their lives could have been saved and what measures must be taken to prevent horrors in the future. Yet amidst these discussions, it's puzzling that there's little focus how the IDF should respond to such a heinous crime, such as the execution of the hostages. While exercising utmost caution concerning the lives of the remaining hostages, Hamas must be held accountable for these barbaric acts. For example, when the group launches rockets at southern Israel, the IDF knows how to clear the launch zones and impose consequences, not only on Hamas, but also on the communities providing them shelter. This is an extraordinarily severe incident. Yeah, no kidding. Yet an immediate response seems absent. It could also be legitimate to employ humanitarian leverage, not through extreme measures, but Israel is certainly not obligated to excel in this area and could begin by reducing the amount of humanitarian aid entering Gaza. Well, that's exactly what Hamas wants them to do. Why? Because the second they do this, Israel won't do this, but if they did this, they said, well, we're not going to give you the aid that you deserve. Well, what happened? The whole world would be in uproar. Again, genocide. Israel is trying to starve off these poor innocent citizens, civilians in Gaza. And so we were right all along. Israel is, as a morally bankrupt country. It's just as bad as Hamas, et cetera, et cetera. So here's the bottom line. There's really nothing they can do. They're doing everything they can right now. What more can they do? Can, bomb some more buildings there, empty buildings? Again, it's futile because they put themselves in this position, that is Israel, after years and years of neglect. stories we have done for, countless years, the last 10 years have talked about this day coming, kicking the can down the road, not dealing with Hamas when they could have earlier. And now we see the fruit of this with the murdering of over 1,200 people on October 7th, 260 odd hostages being taken, many of them now murdered. The problems with the reputation of Israel as far as the world is concerned, because they're going to blame Israel for all of this. But this is what happens when you procrastinate. So we'll see what happens. But again, yeah, it'd be nice if they could do something. What are you going to do? They're doing everything right now they can, and there's still some hostages still alive. We don't know how many, and we'll just see what happens. But as you see from these headlines, Israel's really in a pickle here. There's really no good answer to what to do. And this is a result of lack of leadership over the years. And here we are. So we'll bring you the latest, as it comes across the wire. We'll see what continues to go on, what kind of response they may or may not give. But it seems like the same old is going to be taking place until something happens. Something will have to give. But the idea that somehow there's going to be a last ditch agreement, that to me is insanity. That so Hamas is going to agree to finally a ceasefire. There's no motivation for them whatsoever to do so. The people of Israel, many of them and their leaders, are destroying themselves, committing suicide from within. All right, I'm Don Stewart. Thanks for watching. We'll be back later with more. And we're very excited also, too, to remember starting tomorrow, our new feature, Timeless Truths in the Bible, we'll be talking about tomorrow. We'll mention this tomorrow morning, too. Whatever one needs to know about the Bible, and mention 5 very important truths that you need to know about interpreting the Bible as you study what the Word of God has to say. All right, I'm Don Stewart. Thanks for watching. Until then, as always, may the Lord richly, richly bless.